Good evening. Sorry for the delay. We'll blame it on the mayor. That's why I get the big chair. Take the bullets for starting late. If you would, couple reminders. If you'll turn off your cell phones, number one. Number two, or put them on silent, whatever. Especially you all up here on the dais. If you are planning on addressing the council, please fill out a yellow card, and we'll make sure that we get it put in the right spot of the agenda. And then when you do come up and sit here and speak, make sure that you turn on the microphone so that it is green on the little button, not red. Otherwise, you will hear a voice from the room up above. Do you guys have that?
Let's hear the voice.
Maybe no one's in there. Normally, they'll then reach out over the loudspeaker and tell us to turn on our mics and speak into them.
We heard you.
There we go.
It'll sound something like that. So, good. All right. Whew. Some quick stretches, everyone. Everyone ready? All right. We've already been going since 6 o'clock. We just keep the party going. Okay. So for the TV crew, we're going to get going here in 5, 4, 3, 2. Good evening, Canby, and welcome to the Canby City regular council meeting for May 17th, 2017. If you'll please stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. George, thank you so much for all of us that are gathered here this evening. We ask for your guidance and wisdom be bestowed upon the leaders that are here, that are out in the audience, and those that are at home. We thank you for the blessings that you so graciously provide this community. We ask for your protection. We ask for your guidance. We ask that you keep our men and women that are in service protecting us here at home and abroad. Please protect them and keep them safe. We ask these things in your name. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next on the agenda this evening is we're going to hear a recommendation from Transit Advisory Committee regarding the Transit Master Plan. So with that, I'll have Julie, if you're...
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You may remember me. I'm Michelle Poiro. I'm a transit planner with a firm based in Oregon called Jarrett Walker & Associates, and I've been working with Julie, other staff at Canby Area Transit, and members of the community and the Transit Advisory Committee on this plan. The recommendation that's before you today is from the Transit Advisory Committee, and it was developed with staff, meaning Julie and myself. And it is basically to set priorities for any future revenue in the next couple of years, that revenue should be used to increase frequency on Route 99, rather than to try to reinstate a local circulator route that you used to have. That doesn't mean that eventually you shouldn't try and reinstate a local circulator route, but given the costs that, and given the public input we received, there's pretty broad support for first investing in higher frequency on Route 99. The other part of the recommendation is that there are some technical things that Canby Area Transit can do, mostly behind the scenes, to improve the efficiency of dial-a-ride and paratransit services that would allow the same number of people to continue using those services, but at slightly lower cost to the city. And if those are implemented, that would then be a source of small amounts of new revenue, which could then be used to increase frequency on Route 99. So the ideal path forward for the agency over the next couple years is improve the efficiency of the dial-a-ride and paratransit services, save some resources there, move those resources to Route 99, and then longer term, there may be opportunities to raise additional money for other services, local circulators, but that's more years out in the future than we're planning for in detail right now. How is that for a summary? Do you have any questions about the recommendation before you?
Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is this the decision, or how does this relate to the options that we had been discussing in other public meetings and work sessions?
Thank you. We are asking you to make a decision on the core of the plan. So the decision is whether essentially to prioritize, well, whether first to ask Canby Area Transit staff to improve the efficiency of dial-a-ride and paratransit, and second, to then set as the first priority an increase in service on Route 99 when more resources become available. So that's the decision we're looking for you to make. And the reason we're asking you to do that now with just 4 pages of text in front of you instead of with a 60-page plan is partly we don't want to make you read a 60-page plan just to find out what's really the nugget, the real meat of it. And also because if you decide to do this, we will then write the plan in response to your decision. So this is a really important policy level decision that we want to precede all of the detailed work in the actual draft plan, which will come back to you in a couple of months. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
So the detailed plan will then include all these other options, all these later priorities, but really the nugget of the plan is, what would you do first once there's new money to use?
So this doesn't really take any options off of those options you had explained to us in your reports earlier off the table. This just establishes a couple of priorities.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah. And perhaps I could even say sequencing. There's a sequence that's reflected in this recommendation that we think makes sense.
Any other comments or questions?
Mary, you might want to mention that we've had previous meetings on this.
We have had previous meetings on this.
We have.
So to Councilor Parker's point, yeah, we held a work session for the council, and then there was a Saturday-long community outreach meeting that took place to kind of boil down the points on this based on the survey and questionnaire that Canby Area Transit and your company did to kind of gather the information and get us to this point of knowing where or what direction we want to set as a policy piece with that plan. They had come and given a presentation a month and a half ago about where we just asked them to go back and bring to us, a true recommendation. We had three options to look at, and so the recommendation now here in front of us this evening is if we do any addition or the thought is that we keep the dial-a-ride paratransit as it is, and if we add anywhere, it would be to additional routes along 99 between here in Oregon City and here in Woodburn. That's the recommendation coming from this piece. Yes.
Thank you for your work. I have a question kind of about the sequencing, because I know that we've talked about the different options, and if I understand correctly, the priority was kind of determined by a lot of community input and what users wanted, and the community had spoken up about. My question is more about the sequencing. When it comes to sequencing the next phases, is that take into account primarily community input, or is there any interest on the part of CAT in prioritizing phases that might increase unique ridership, new unique riders, or how did the sequencing, I guess my question is, fall into place after phase 1?
Sure. So the basic question that we put in front of the public and stakeholders and ultimately the TAC was if Canby Area Transit comes into some new resources, what would you have them do first, essentially? Add more frequency to Route 99 or reinstate a local one-way hourly circulator route? And by not quite a margin of 2 to 1, people said, Route 99, do that first. And it's not that they didn't see a value. Everybody could see a value in a local circulator route, but people basically said, when push comes to shove, if we only have a small amount of additional resources, put it on Route 99. By not quite 2 to 1 margin. And that margin we saw in the web survey. We also saw it in the stakeholder meeting. We did all of this outreach in English and Spanish, and we saw actually the same margin across English speakers and Spanish speakers. as well as across many different age groups. So we couldn't exactly categorize people based on their demographics and their opinion. So the people we heard from were fairly representative of the community, and the margin was significant enough that we thought it was actionable. In terms of sequencing, what that told us was, well, then the first thing that ought to happen is more trips on Route 99. And advantageously, you can add one trip at a time to Route 99. So as CAT has more resources, even if it's small amounts of resources from year to year, it's not impossible to slowly dial up the frequency on Route 99. You can't say the same thing about a local circulator. You need a bunch of resources to just turn it on, because you don't want to run it for 1 hour a day, then next year 2 hours a day, the next year 3 hours a day. You really want to turn it on for at least 8 hours a day right from the get-go. So I don't know what we would have recommended if the community had expressed more support for the local circulator, but they didn't. They expressed more support for Route 99. So in terms of sequencing, that's actually much easier to implement. Part of the recommendation is that Canby Area Transit staff and their contractors should be working on improving the efficiency of dial-a-ride and paratransit, so that instead of 1.6 people per hour in a vehicle, you have I can't remember the exact number, 2 point something. And that would get you to a point where you can actually save enough resources off dial-a-ride and paratransit that you can start increasing the frequency on Route 99. So that's the first phase. But recognizing that there was a lot of interest in a local circulator, and especially we got so many comments about weekend service. So in the later phases of this recommendation, we point out when you would want to add local circulator on weekdays, and then when you would want to maybe add Route 99 service on the weekend, and then a local circulator on the weekend, and so on. So the phases relate to how important things seemed to be to the public. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah, because I guess I understood phase one really well. We had a lot of conversation about phase one. I was more concerned about, not concerned, but interested in how the decision came to be that phase two was then weekend intercity service, and then phase three was local circulator. I was just wondering if that was based entirely on, or mostly on public interest, or if that was taking other factors into account.
So why not have phase two be local circulator and phase three be intercity? That's mostly based on what we heard from the public. We heard a lot from the public about inability to get to service jobs, especially in the Portland area, on Saturday and later in the evening. And so that's not really served by a local circulator. Local circulator, what we heard from people is they want to be able to go grocery shopping, they want to be able to, go to the pool, go to the senior center. So yes, that subtlety of, do you go to weekend intercity service first, or do you go to a local circulator first? That's based on the individual comments that we got from the public.
Sorry, just one more question. So I remember when we were first having this conversation, one of the barriers to weekend service was that if people worked on the weekends, they worked Saturday and Sunday. And so if we only provided service on Saturday, it didn't really fill the need, and people would need a car anyway. But it looks like phase 2A is mostly saying we're just going to do Saturday. We would start with just Saturday. So I guess that's really where my question is headed. I was under the impression that weekend service didn't have the same amount of value unless we provided both weekend days, whereas a local circulator could provide value differently. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can all we all have all the information we know to think about this, right? So if you run week service on only Saturday and not Sunday, okay. If people work or go to school during the week, at least they can use it to shop or reach services on Saturday, right? If people work on the weekend but don't have a car, I'm sure they'd rather have a car, but then they can get a ride from family only on Sunday, not also on Saturday. So there is some marginal benefit, but I absolutely agree, having Saturday and Sunday is more than twice as good as having only Saturday. But I still think that having Saturday intercity service or a Saturday local circulator is advantageous. I wouldn't turn my nose up at it just because you can't also do Sunday.
That answers my question.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
So do we have any idea what a timeline would be, maybe after we increase efficiencies over a certain period, and then, okay, now we can add a bit of service, more service on 99? Or is that impacted by MV Transportation, the contract we're going to approve, that's increasing a bit too?
The contract certainly has an impact on the timeline because
Okay.
the costs have an
Yeah.
impact on the timeline. But I also think that it's a question of how quickly staff and MV can work together, and also how quickly customers respond. Because this is an iterative process of setting customer expectations, changing customer expectations. So I don't have a clear answer for that. I wonder if Julie does. No? Okay. So I don't know. But I think we're going to put more thought into that over the next month, so there will be more information about that in the draft plan. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask another question. Based on your comment, I want to make sure I'm clear on what we're voting on today. Mr. Mayor, I thought your comments made it sound like we were definitively deciding to, at least at this point in time, keep both paratransit and dial-a-ride. We had our workshops before. There was some discussion of an alternative too that was listed on that I really liked, which actually was expanding dial-a-ride and potentially taking dial-a-ride outside the city, using these efficiencies with dial-a-ride to increase their capacity on those, and then potentially saving some money that could be expanded in a local route, and as well as increasing 99. And I preferred that alternative, and I want to make sure that that alternative is still available at a later date. Or are we deciding, if is anything we're deciding today foreclosing that alternative in the near future?
I don't recall any proposal to expand dial-a-ride beyond the city limits. There is paratransit to Oregon City, and that we're recommending that be maintained. So that may be what you're thinking of, is keeping the paratransit to Oregon City operating. There was also a conversation about whether farther in the future Canby should be running only dial-a-ride and not paratransit, or only paratransit and not also dial-a-ride. And those are both possible. In the end, it seemed to us that if you did either of those things, it wouldn't actually change the number of customers all that much, and it wouldn't change the basic math all that much. And so there wasn't a big benefit to making that particular change. So what's proposed here is to keep dial-a-ride and paratransit. They're very similar services, except that if you're eligible for paratransit, you get to go to Oregon City. But in order to save resources, not expand them, which would not save resources, that would require more resources being put into dial-a-ride and paratransit if you went farther. But keep the same service area, keep all the same customers, and get basically more people to share the bus with each other. And in that way, reduce the cost of those services without reducing the number of customers. So that's what's in this proposal.
Didn't we? Wasn't there a discussion that that dial-a-ride was able to recapture more and raise more revenue from the users than paratransit, where paratransit had a locked or fixed fee, and dial-a-ride had no price restriction? We were able to recapture more from the users?
Yes, that is accurate. Paratransit, the fare may not be any more than twice the base fare on your local fixed route. Right now, a little piece of Route 99 is considered a local fixed route. Fare is $1. That means your paratransit fare could never be more than $2. It can never be more than twice the base fare. Dial-a-ride is an optional service you're providing for optional reasons. You could charge as much as you wanted for it. But I do want to caution you, fares are a really lousy way to raise revenue for transit. They just don't get you very much revenue. The range of fare box recovery that's normal for transit agencies is between like 5 and 20% of the cost of running the transit service. So when I talk about raising resources or running more efficiently, and that generating resources that you can spend in another way, what I'm really talking about is not getting more fares, but rather basically having fewer hours of driver time to serve the same number of people. Because then you can assign that driver time to another service where you get more people per hour. So yes, you're right about fares and dial-a-ride. You have the flexibility to charge much more on dial-a-ride, but it's still not going to be a very fruitful source of revenue for service in the future.
And does having both dial-a-ride and paratransit available and on-call takes up extra resources, right? That if they were devoted to just one of them, would be a cost savings that could be dedicated
Yes.
other places, such as expanding dial-a-ride outside the city limits.
Well, if you save costs on dial-a-ride so that you can expand dial-a-ride outside the city limits, I don't know if I would say you've saved on dial-a-ride. I'd say you've just spread it out more thinly. So you certainly could have a conversation about spreading dial-a-ride out more thinly, and paratransit means, much longer wait times for people. It also might mean that their trip to someplace goes via someplace very far away. Like the trip to Oregon City goes via Malala. Because that's what these services are. You share a vehicle, which means you ride along to somebody else's house. So expanding outside the city has consequences for, the efficiency of the service. I would expect it to move you in the other direction, not more people per vehicle per hour, but fewer, just because of the distances you'd have to cover. But you could absolutely do it. You could definitely talk about, or you could talk about doing just dial-a-ride trips to Oregon City. I think all of those things, though, would actually take more resource. And so that would be in the other direction from what we're recommending here. Because what we're recommending is actually a small shift of resources from dial-a-ride and paratransit towards Route 99. And I think if you wanted to spread further out geographically, you would have to pull in some more resources to do that. So that would be a shift of resources from Route 99 to dial-a-ride and paratransit. But to answer your more specific question about if you went to only offering dial-a-ride or only offering paratransit, could you save some resources? I think you could. I don't think it would be a lot, and that's why we didn't recommend it here.
Did anything come of the conversation on the IGA with Clackamas County or Metro or whoever it was?
That conversation has not been broached with TriMet. If you're interested in opening that conversation with TriMet again, then I suggest you have a conversation about that. We are taking that IGA as current agreement that should be respected.
Additional thoughts or questions? So let me clarify then, what we're deciding tonight, I think, is we asked them to come back with a recommendation for us to either take it, and then they can run forth and complete the transit master plan based off that recommendation, not excluding the other options in the plan necessarily, but those would not necessarily be highlighted, correct?
Or they're later in the sequence.
Or they're later in the sequence.
Yeah.
Okay. So does that address your comments there?
And I can definitely pay some attention in the writing of the draft plan to this issue of should you ever go all dial-a-ride or should you ever go all paratransit, and what would the consequences be? What would the costs be? What would the savings? What would the impacts be on riders? We can certainly make sure that there's some detail in there, so just to help you prepare for, a next conversation if you want to have that conversation in the future.
Does that satisfy the questions around that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
The other piece I would think, perhaps, again, goes back to our conversation a little bit ago, but I think this council is gather information, think about it, let's marinate a little bit on it and then circle back. So I think it may be when the master plan is done, it may end up, and for Kim and Rick, a work session piece for us to dive into that in a work session to be a little bit deeper and more thorough to make sure we are covering out those bases versus a lengthy, prior to it coming before the council, before an approval.
This is a process that's been started and stopped several times over the last several years, and it does make good sense because you are finally coming out with a new plan. It does make good sense to engage in another work session, make sure you have adequate time. I would even suggest that you do it on an evening, not immediately before a council meeting, so that you can take as much time as you need to delve into the topics, and when you get to the end of the evening, you know exactly where you want to direct your efforts and your resources.
that help this group in terms of
I think
getting wrapped around this topic?
I'm all for another work session, but I do want to say, the reason this recommendation is before you is so that we don't go off and write a whole detailed plan all predicated on some basic ideas that you don't actually like. So what's before you is, do you support the basic ideas here, that this is phase 0, you make technical improvements to efficiency, phase 1, Route 99 frequency, and then later phases are all the other good stuff. If you do support the basic ideas here, and you adopt this, that just tells us that we can go build a detailed plan around it. So the reason we're here is so that we use our resources efficiently to build that detailed plan. We didn't want to just bring you a detailed plan, you have to read the whole thing, and then we find out that actually you're not in support of some of the really core ideas in the plan.
And I appreciate that, because I really get tired of redundancy of work. So that would drive me absolutely bananas. So does that satisfy, I think, because that was some of your pieces as well?
Well, I apologize for, I might have missed a step or just simply forgotten, but to Councilor Smith's point about the conversation with TriMet or Metro, what was that conversation actually going to be about?
Nobody has proposed going and talking to TriMet that I've heard, but the status right now is TriMet and Canby have an intergovernmental agreement that they came to in 2001, I guess, just before service was started,
Right.
that Canby will meet TriMet's paratransit obligation for customers who either begin or end their trip in Canby. So TriMet has an obligation to provide paratransit for people from Oregon City to places near Oregon City. Canby doesn't technically need to have a paratransit obligation to Oregon City, but anyway, sort of does, and came to an agreement with TriMet that Canby wouldn't just deliver customers on either Route 99 or Dial-A-Ride or paratransit to Oregon City Transit Center and make TriMet take them to their final destination, but rather that Canby would take them to their final destination. I don't know that this is a bad deal, but it may be a little dated, because at the time, Canby had a lot of local fixed route service, and therefore Canby had a very clear and obvious paratransit obligation. And Canby's paratransit obligation is much less clear now. So it just might be worth revisiting the IGA. It's also possible that Canby can provide a service that's more like Dial-A-Ride, but more scheduled, that isn't paratransit to destinations in Oregon City, and that would satisfy TriMet. I don't know. It might be worth having a conversation with them, but anyway, we've taken the IGA as fixed, working, a given, and we aren't basing any of our recommendations on it changing, but we can certainly advise you on things you could say to TriMet if you wanted to talk to TriMet about it again.
That was kind of my question, if we were actually going to propose a change or not. So, okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
I don't think there's a desire to.
Not on my part.
The other thing is that, you might just ask yourself, forget the IGA, and do you want to be providing essentially Dial-A-Ride or a paratransit to Oregon City destinations? And maybe you do, because that's very valuable to the people in your community. So.
Yeah, the underlying question of addressing or attempting to address the IGA with Metro would delay this process probably indefinitely to get through the, and this effort has made it farther than the last couple efforts because you as a council and the Transit Advisory Committee have kept a very strong focus on an expected outcome, and there are definitely variables associated with the choices that need to be made, but introducing unknown outcomes such as a negotiation with TriMet relative to an existing intergovernmental agreement could delay this indefinitely. I certainly wouldn't recommend that any part of a decision point include reopening discussions with TriMet. If we want to pursue that, we can pursue it separately or in a parallel track. Get the plan implemented, approved, get the the transit program moving forward, and then if we want to explore options to tweak the program, I think we can do that, including and up to engaging TriMet in discussions.
And my read of the IGA is that actually you have the flexibility to change the way services run to these Oregon City destinations, that there is plenty of improvement and change possible without changing the IGA. So I think you can, there's a lot that can be done before you have to go back to TriMet and renegotiate it.
You're being very optimistic about TriMet. Just lay that out there.
Yeah, I think the path of least resistance is finding a solution that doesn't in any way give the appearance of encumbering TriMet's authority. Trying to think of a nice term, that was the best one I could come up with.
So there isn't exactly a motion per se, but just a matter of consensus that we're getting, that this is the recommendation we're getting is what we asked for, and that this gives them at least a path to create the plan based around these elements in the recommendation. So I'm seeing head nods that that's the go-ahead.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I like these priorities, yeah.
So I think you have consensus from us that you are tracking well.
Great.
And to do that, is there any other,
There is a recommended motion in the
Oh, there
packet,
is.
though.
I apologize.
I'm happy to make it.
That would be fantastic.
All right. I move to adopt the Staff and Transit Advisory Committee's recommendation of a phased approach to outlining future Canby area transit services in the Transit Master Plan as set forth in the April 21st, 2017 staff report.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Councilor Height, seconded by Councilor Spoon. Any other further discussion?
We will be having a work session later on the more detailed plan.
When the plan is fully developed and vetted out, we will, that's what we were just talking about, there will be an additional work session to dive into the nitty-gritty and the details of the transit plan before it comes back for us to approve it.
And
At which point, we will probably have more dialogue at that point as well.
And I'll be voting for it, but I do reserve my preference for expanding Dial-A-Ride and probably combining those two programs into one, but maybe she can answer more questions on that later.
Happy
Be
to.
noted. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And that carries 6-0.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Michelle.
I'll go write the plan now.
There you go.
So we'll have that next month? Thanks, Michelle. Moving next in the agenda is to communications. Anything, Rick, Joe, and Kim, anything on your front?
No, I don't.
No. Okay. First opportunity this evening for citizen input and community announcements. So this is an opportunity for audience members to address the council on items not necessarily on the agenda. Each person will be given 3 minutes to speak. You are first required to fill out a testimony card. Those in yellow that are located there on the back. If you'd please bring those up to the city recorder. She will pass them down through me. And we will make every opportunity to respond to questions or and whatnot raised during the input before tonight's meeting ends or quickly thereafter. Our first person up is Sarah Helpler regarding the invocation prior to the meeting. Hi. Yep.
Like you said, I'm Sarah Hepler. I was born and raised in Canby. My husband was also born and raised, and we came back here about 15 years ago to continue raising our kids in Canby. So I just wanted to...
Speak into the mic, please.
Oh, sorry.
The ceiling again.
I try to attend the city council meetings when I can, but when I can't, because I'm a mom of 3 kids, busy kids, I do watch them online. So thank you for putting them online in that service. I really appreciate it. So when I was watching, I think it was April 19th, 2 citizens spoke, Bob Jones and Karen Fenton, I believe. That struck me. One is Bob Jones. I remember him from high school. So I was excited to see him. But they both spoke about inviting people from the community to do the invocation prior to the city council meeting. And I was really excited about that as an opportunity to invite people in from the community in this room in a very positive way. I'm also a teacher, so I'm always thinking education-wise. It would be a great opportunity for kids that are studying government to come in and say 2-3 minutes about the importance of local government or our civics duty. I'd love to see a youth choir group come in and sing a song prior. I just think it would be a win-win situation for the community and the council to bring people in a very positive way. And if you need any help making that happen, please let me know.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it. Next, we have Betty Crawford talking about the Dolly Parton Library Initiative. Or award. Dolly Parton Initiative. Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor.
Hi, how are you, Betty?
My name is Betty Crawford. I am a member of Canby Kiwanis. I am the Kiwanis Foundation Chair for that. We had a really cool event on Saturday that I wanted to share with you and kind of catch you up on something we're doing. We had a dance party kickoff for little kids here at the library. Kiwanis International motto is serving the children of the world. Canby Kiwanis embraces that motto but brings it in more personally. We try to serve the children of Canby. And one of the projects we have taken on in looking at this is addressing early childhood reading. That's the kiddos that aren't in kindergarten yet. And all the children in Canby should have this opportunity. So the Dolly Parton Imagination Library is a project we have taken on as the Kiwanis are signing up any child under 5 years of age, and I'll tell you in a minute how they can, but to receive a free book every month. The Kiwanis has taken on this project ourselves in here, and we service all the children in the Canby School District. Under 5 years, every month, they will be able to receive a free book addressed and mailed to them. And the sign up for this, I want to please share so you can also share this, is we have sign ups that parent or guardians can give us the information that is private, confidential, to come to the library, to the Kiwanis thrift store, and I am aware online to sign up their kids to get these books. My youngest grandson is 18 months old, and he will be receiving his first book this month. And I'm excited because he already loves to read. The event we had was, as I said, a dance party, and it was. We had an ABC band there over in the Willamette Room, I believe it is, over here. And the kids were dancing. Boy, we had some couple twins that were just rocking it. And they got to do some arts and crafts, decorate their own book holder. We also served corn dogs and popcorn, and kids who signed up got to get their first book here. Everybody just had fun. Even the grown-ups were getting their faces painted, and just a blast. But with this project, we were able to sign up on Saturday approximately 43 kiddos. We are now at about 115 kiddos in the Canby area that are going to be getting books to read or just even to look at the pictures and hold. The earliest experience with books will create a wonderful lifelong experience. So I think that's all I have to share. It was exciting.
Wonderful.
And it was fun. And yes, I was a bunny that day.
Did you say you were a bunny?
I was a bunny.
Face painted.
Face painted ears, you know.